Hey, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. My name is Salvador Briggman, and in today's episode, we are exploring the wonderful world of equity crowdfunding. And specifically, I brought on an expert when it comes to equity crowdfunding, a little bit different, though, than other forms of regulation crowdfunding. This style of equity crowdfunding is where you can actually invest in startup and growing companies. Instead of getting an ownership percentage in that company, you're actually underwriting or helping them when it comes to the debt that they're taking on as a company, and you get fixed income payments. So think of this almost as like you're giving a loan to that company or a very small amount as a piece of a larger loan, and all these investors are piling in to allow that company to take that loan. So in today's episode, you're going to hear a heck of a lot about what you actually got to do in order to be successful with this style of equity crowdfunding. You're going to hear from one of the experts and a founder of a growing platform in the niche, and as well, something that you might not even think about, but that's incredibly important for anyone who's doing a startup funding raise utilizing equity crowdfunding. So if you've never heard about me, my name is Salvador Briggman, as you know, and on this podcast, we really dial into what's working when it comes to crowdfunding, the mechanics, what's happening behind the scenes. How can you employ the strategies, the techniques, the tactics that are going into successful campaigns? How can you harness the power of the crowd and actually, whether it's an idea, a product, a prototype, a startup, or a tabletop game, how can you use this as a tool in order to get funding, to build a tribe, and at the end of the day, I think, impact the world for the positive. So I've been doing this podcast since 2015. You can go back and listen to archives of the show. I've documented case studies of individuals, entrepreneurs, and creators worldwide who are successful with crowdfunding. They tell you exactly what they're doing behind the scenes in order to kindle that success and get those results. We've done over 400 podcast episodes and episodes that get into many different elements of the launch process. And I would say that the great thing about this podcast is that I bring on many different styles of guests from different walks of life, from different areas of the globe, all with the key purpose or the key goal or mission of proving to you that anyone can be successful when it comes to crowdfunding. So listen up to this episode if you're interested in learning more about equity crowdfunding. But before we get into it, I do have a free resource to share with you. And that's if you're looking to get startup capital and raise funding for your startup company using crowdfunding, there's a great free course I have out there called Equity Crowdfunding Explained, a free equity crowdfunding course, which you can go to at crowdcrux.com/equity course. Just enter your name and an email and you can join my free course and start getting some emails from me, warming it up to the best practices when it comes to launching an equity crowdfunding campaign on websites like WeFunder and Start Engine. In addition, I do have a textbook, or if you will, a guidebook that goes hand in hand with this free course. You can actually get a free copy on Audible of this guidebook, this really paint by numbers formula that goes into launching an equity crowdfunding campaign, getting results, marketing it, and actually how to get investors as well when it comes to your startup company. If you want to learn more about that, go to crowdcrux.com/equity audio, and you can grab a copy of Equity Crowdfunding Explained. Again, that is crowdcrux.com/equity audio. Just go there, get a free copy. All you got to do is get a free trial of Audible, and you can get a free copy of Equity Crowdfunding Explained. Again, that's crowdcrux.com/equity audio. Without further ado, let's jump into this podcast episode. And I would say that one thing that really stood out about this one is this idea of impact investing. So stay tuned. It's coming up right after this. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. We are lucky enough to speak with the founder of a growing crowdfunding platform who's been able to actually attract a decent amount of investment when it comes to Reg CF at $4.3 million across 11 projects with a really unique angle as well. We're going to learn a lot from Will. Will, welcome to the podcast.
Salvador, man, really looking forward to this conversation. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. So maybe you can fill in some gaps in that introduction. Just tell the audience a bit about who you are and the platform that you are working on here?
Sure. So Will Wiseman, CEO and co-founder of Climatize. We are a Reg CF platform that enables anyone to invest in renewable energy projects across the US. My background was in renewable energy engineering. I've been in the space for 10 years, and I've really played every role at the table, from engineering, procurement, and construction through to project management, power market analysis, as well as now on the financing side as the platform operator. And so I've really seen every kind of angle of these projects and realized that helping finance projects was a really high leverage opportunity to bring many more projects like that to life. And so, happy to dig into kind of the why and the origin story of Climatize as we get deeper in the conversation.
And how long have you guys been in operation now?
Yeah, for 1 year. So in 1 year, we've done 11 raises for $4.3 million roughly of projects, and all of them have gotten 100% funded. So we've been really proud of the success of the issuers on our platform.
And in terms of renewable energy, is there a focus there? Is this like technology innovations? Is this related to, housing? Is it kind of across the board? What's sort of the focus on renewable energy there?
Yeah, so predominantly solar and storage. And that was really my background and specialization. It's what I worked in predominantly. It's where I have my 2 master's degrees in, as well as, the technology is a little bit farther along the commercialization scale there. So it's a lot less technical risk than, say, new hydrogen projects or things like that are still kind of in their maturation phase. And then additionally, we are a debt platform. So fixed interest rate promissory notes, and that being different from, say, investing in the equity of a startup. With our platform, you're actually doing the project finance for these projects.
Got it. So you basically have these creators coming to you, looking to partner with the crowd and to get an injection of cash, right? And then you're connecting with them with the community to be able to do that.
Yeah. So one of the real challenges of small to medium scale renewable energy projects, and we're talking kind of $250,000 to $5 million, they are too large for many of the community banks or CDFIs, credit unions, who oftentimes don't know how to underwrite the solar projects, either from an economic perspective or from a technical perspective. And then at the same time, those projects are too small for the institutional lenders like the Wall Street banks. And so you have this really underfunded middle ground of distributed energy resources that are actually a really good fit for crowdfunding and community-centric finance.
When someone is coming to you and looking to partner with you and to get a loan like this, are there any kinds of requirements that you have of creators that are launching a project on your platform?
Yeah. So, we evaluate every project as if we were the investment bank behind it. So we're going to be looking at everything. They're going to have all of their designs in place. They're going to have their suppliers picked. They're going to have their interconnection permits, their environmental studies, their site leases. These projects are pretty well developed by the time they ever get to us. And then, of course, for the Reg CF requirements, they're going to have either reviewed or audited financials as well. And then we are not working with first-time developers. That being a big difference. We really think it's important that, given the crowdfunding angle, that people don't need to show up with a background in renewable energy engineering to participate on the platform. That we hold a high standard in terms of filtering projects through our criteria. And so we're actually inaugural members of the National Community Solar Partnership with the Department of Energy. And through that was in part where we crafted our due diligence process. And so we do screen a lot of projects before ever allowing any of them to come in and raise on the platform. So it's not so much a kind of GoFundMe style where anyone can come up and set up a campaign and get going. There's a pretty thorough due diligence process before we ever let issuers onto the platform.
When you have an issuer, they go through that process, and let's just say they've been accepted. What happens next? Do you have a community of people that you introduce this to? Are they doing the marketing to their friends and family and to their connections? What is the crowd, if you will, when it comes to the project?
Yeah, so at this point, we are a community of 875 investors. So while the community is relatively small, we're actually seeing, very outsized investments in contrast to kind of the broader community, or pardon me, the crowdfunding market. So I think it was Community Capital Advisors, one of those groups that publishes one of the very reputable kind of market reports. I think they had average crowdfunding checks being in the range of about $1,000 to $2,000. Ours are upwards of $7,500, and average account size is upwards of $30,000 on Climatize. So while we're a small community, we're seeing very outsized participation by each member. And so with that, yes, then the issuer comes and they are able to point the community towards their clean energy project. And we've found oftentimes the underlying, business may be a farmer's hardware store, a farm. We've done everything from houses of worship to Shakespeare theaters, for example, and often find that those projects that have kind of an embedded community as well, those will be the ones that oftentimes find momentum through the kind of, call it, middle 50% of the project, which is where crowdfunding campaigns can get a little bit slower. So then they're able to reach out and bring their community in to co-invest in their local energy resources. And that's been a really exciting evolution in the way that energy is kind of co-owned by a community.
Super cool.
And
yeah. So in thinking about that, I mean, you mentioned this idea of momentum, right? Mm-hmm. And momentum is key across many different types of crowdfunding. How do you feel like that plays a role when it comes to investment crowdfunding, specifically with debt? Why is it so important for the creators on your platform to have momentum? What does that really mean?
Yeah, so I'll give two examples here. So one, we had a $100,000 project that we launched in April. It was funded in less than 2 hours. So boom, done. It surprised us. Then, we now currently have a project that's $980,000 on the platform, and it's stalled kind of in the middle of the project. And so there was two kind of insights from that it's often good to have scarcity, obviously, as with fundraising, even for corporate equity. If you're going to raise venture capital, there has to be momentum. And obviously, if you have, greater demand than supply, then you'll have kind of greater control of the overall process. And so we found that, projects that are a little bit more also in the kind of sweet spot in terms of liquidity in the marketplace go much faster. Whereas right now we found that the $980,000 project was a little bit larger than what would have been kind of in the strike zone for our platform. And so in the kind of middle 50% zone, it slowed down a little bit. And at that point, then, we spoke to the issuer and found that as we had been receiving customer feedback, hey, if you guys maybe improve the visuals, rework the story, thought about how better to market this to the community, they took that feedback and iterated their project portfolio, or rather the project page, and that actually reactivated the community and got them through that middle zone. And so that's a kind of real need in terms of momentum, but also think about how you can reactivate investors within the community.
Right. So it sounds like you're saying two things. One is that, the page or the campaign you're running is kind of like a moving document, right? Like you can change it, you can improve it as you go, and it's going to be kind of a multi-stage process, right?
Exactly.
And the second there being this idea, I think you mentioned around liquidity, right? Around 100K being an easier raise. Do you think it's sort of the sweet spot of the amount you're going for, or what did you mean by the liquidity aspect?
Yeah, so I would say right now, if I had to make a guess for our platform, sweet spot for liquidity would be kind of in the range of about $250,000 to $500,000. And that's really more so looking at, because regulation crowdfunding, you have to have your campaign open for a minimum 21 days, right? And that's if you're doing regulation crowdfunding, like actually debt or equity. And so with that, you would think, okay, kind of the perfect sweet spot of time to fill a campaign would be exactly that 21-day mark. And then from there, how quickly can you raise a project? So closer to around the holiday season, we had a $264,000 project in Tennessee that was fully funded in 8 days. So you would see the small $100,000 project, 2 hours, 264, 8 days. We would kind of project a little bit out if we tried to kind of draw a trajectory from that and say, okay, maybe the sweet spot's a little bit closer to $400,000. And that would be then, if you have the kind of perfect flow of a campaign over that period, what would be the time to hit 100% in the absolute minimum of Reg CF raise?
I see. So you're measuring it based on how quickly someone gets to the amount that they're looking for. right?
Exactly. Yeah. Because think about this. We did the $100,000 in 2 hours, but unfortunately, that money still had to sit in the escrow account for the next 3 weeks
Right.
until it was over the Reg CF 3 week hurdle. And that was like, okay, well, this is great, but maybe we could have gone a little bit bigger. It was amazing that they got their money, but they couldn't actually pull it out until we met the SEC's requirements.
Understood. I see.
Yeah.
Got it. So that's really interesting to me, and I think for anyone who's listening, it also gives an idea of sort of the check size or the size when it comes to the raise that's really working well, right, when it comes to your platform.
Yeah. So, we're working to really better visualize and track this on our platform so that also as we think about supply and demand at any marketplace, that we're not flooding too much supply at any given time, as in there's too many offerings, too much, kind of available investments, because then no one hits 100% and no one gets exactly what they want. Whereas,
Right.
Same deal, if we go too much demand, not enough supply, then you have that kind of experience in which it raises $100,000 in 2 hours, but you can't access that money because it's locked up for the SEC's requirement.
So picture this, you're at a party, Will, and someone comes up to you and is like, why is it that people are investing on these kinds of platforms? I mean, you have stock market, you can have bonds, right? You have real estate. There's so many different investments out there. Why do you feel like investors are participating in this kind of asset class? And more specifically with Reg CF, why do you feel like that's something that they're passionate about?
Sure. So, table stakes is return and term. Those two are kind of mandatory when it comes to selling something as a financial product, right? The issuer is coming to sell a financial product, and you have to at least recognize that this is an investment. And then behind that is the transparency and the usability of our platform. So, we've put a lot of effort into making a really streamlined, simple to use user interface and user experience. But really, it's that, many people who are looking to impact invest, for one, there has been a lot of headwinds in the ESG world. 69% of those portfolios, if you actually open the hood, hold some position in oil and gas major. So there's a breakdown of kind of trust in and around that asset class and that kind of classification. And then there's another kind of thought with investors where, hey, if I put $1,000 to Tesla, what does that really do? I have no idea. I have no idea what the end product of that investment is. Right. And the kind of third lever is maybe I'm going to go buy carbon credits, but are you going to plant a tree in some faraway country? And does it ever really happen? And so there's kind of this broad breakdown of trust in and around impact investing. And so crowdfunding actually provides a really interesting channel to provide visibility to the end product. And when we're doing something like project finance, where there's actually a new renewable energy project at the end of the day, and you get a drone photo of the impact of your money, and you can see, for example, John and Angela, the farmer's hardware store owners, as people, and you can see them with that project, it helps rebuild the trust that has kind of been broken down around the industry. And that has been what we have found to be really activating for investors, because it also helps climate feel a little bit more human. It's a challenge that, when you're fighting an invisible gas in the atmosphere, it can feel very intangible. Yeah. And if you instead focus on, hey, look, you're helping build a renewable energy project here in America that is helping a small business and 2 real people in the world, and then at the same time, you can earn a competitive yield on that, that has been really appealing to folks. And that's where we've seen that this kind of represents a way for people to step around the traditional gatekeepers that have maybe obstructed action with respect to climate change. And instead, they can begin to say, hey, look, I'm ready to put my money where my mouth is. And I want to begin really allocating capital to building renewable energy projects. And that's what we've seen activate the community.
If you're worried about the fulfillment and shipping part of your Kickstarter campaign when it comes to getting out all those perks and rewards to your backers, rest assured I've put together a complete Kickstarter fulfillment and shipping checklist for you, and it's free. This is sponsored by the folks at FulfillRight, and they thought that you should have this checklist as part of your arsenal going into a crowdfunding campaign. If you want to get instant access to this checklist and it's free, you can go to fulfillright.com/checklist. Again, That is fulfillrite.com/checklist, fulfillrite.com/checklist. Just go to that link and you can download it immediately. To zoom into one of the words you used there, this idea of impact investing, right? How do you feel like an impact investor differs from a traditional investor? If that's the first time someone's hearing that term, how would you really define that for someone who has never heard that before?
Sure. Yeah. So I would say impact investor doesn't necessarily qualify that you are skipping returns for some outcome. It just means that when you are looking to invest, you have a lens over kind of your thesis. And you are saying, hey, look, I am now trying to create this outcome through the things that I invest my capital in. And so that is how I would define impact investor. We don't think that someone needs to sacrifice returns to be able to create impact. The projects on Climatize have return profiles between 8 and 10% with 2 to 5 year terms. And those are fixed interest debt notes. So it's not very, say, dubious. It's like, hey, this is actually the interest rate that accrues on these notes as these projects are being built.
I see. So to kind of put it, I mean, this is a fancy term, but in econ, you call it like a positive externality, right? Which is as a result of you investing, not only do you get what you want, which is a return and, to have really good financial situation there, but you're also doing good, right? For the planet in some way.
Exactly. Yep.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, first of all, what I find so fascinating about that is, that's something that you have come to grow into. I mean, you mentioned in the beginning stage here, you had a history with the actual climate change and sort of developing different technology there. I'm really curious, what caused you to focus more on the finance side, when you were getting started here with your platform, and what caused you to shift there in your own journey, out of curiosity?
Sure. Yeah. So kind of running back on my story briefly, my father was a marine biologist. And so I grew up in and around the ocean. And from a very young age, I saw the rapid collapse of those ecosystems. And so it made me very aware of climate change as a problem. And so I am 27. I got into the renewable energy industry when I was 17. I started putting solar panels on roofs to pay my way through college. That was how I earned my mechanical engineering degree. Through that, then worked in power market analysis using AI. And then additionally, also in large-scale project management. And it was at the time of doing project management that I realized, hey, I am not going to create the impact that I really want by being a cubicle engineer. So I went back, got my 2 graduate degrees, published my thesis from the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. And while I was working through that master's degree program is when I met my co-founder. And she and I joined the global climate strikes. And we were in Barcelona at the time, actually. And we saw 100,000 people protesting in the streets for climate action. And I have this vivid memory of standing on a bench and looking out over this sea of people. And there was this incredible turnout of hope and motivation. And yet I was struck by this sad realization that we were all going to go home, and the next day, nothing was going to be different. And if you get 100,000 people together and their best option is to make a cardboard sign, that's a glaring problem. And from that, it was this awareness that, hey, there has to be a better way. And so as we began interviewing people, from those strikes, we kept asking, A, what is the common sentiment? Which is, for many people, climate change feels like an urgent problem, but they often feel powerless to make a difference. And we asked, what is it that everyone could contribute? And one of those common threads was capital. And so we looked and we said, well, wow, this is just one of hundreds of cities in which actually 7.5 million people around the world turned up for these strikes. Like, what if we could translate all of that momentum into tangible carbon reduction? And so it was literally inspired by a giant crowd of people saying we want to see action. And so it was almost fitting that we would go and use crowdfunding as a way to now drive the energy transition forward.
Super cool. Super cool. And what I love about that as well is that, you're not asking for something for nothing, right? You're really providing a financial product that people can participate in and can experience great returns and at the same time have a good impact, right, on the planet.
Yeah, and the minimum on Climatize is $10. So, we wanted to make it as accessible to anyone, regardless of your financial capacity, because we look at the energy transition as one of the largest wealth creation opportunities of our lifetime. When you think about re-architecting our entire society to be carbon neutral, then turning over the entire energy resource mix and building a renewable energy world is an enormous capital expenditure. And yet, kind of based on the status quo, the everyday person was going to be forced to the sidelines as the incumbents that got us in this position were going to be the only ones that actually benefited from that change, because they would be the ones that got the incentives and ultimately slowly made the change to become the new investors of that world. And so we thought, wow, what if we can empower the public to become active stakeholders in this and begin to really be the kind of spear point on driving that change here and now?
From what I'm hearing, from you going through some of these major points and what's working on your platform, one of the big ones I take away is that in order to be successful, whether that's with your platform or regulation crowdfunding, you have to understand the impact investor. And it sounds like the gap between the impact investor and maybe someone who's launching a project is storytelling. What do you feel like, storytelling means to you, and how has that been a part of your platform's project so far?
Sure. So I'll speak to two angles here, because we have impact investors, and then we have a lot of people that have actually come from real estate investing. So I'll start first with the impact investors. So for some, they are looking at it from, hey, look, I really want to support not only climate action, but also the underlying, business or group of people. And so through that, it's really important to drive kind of the human story there, to be able to say, hey, this is going on this farm. And these are two maybe father-son farmers on a multi-generational farm. And now they are driving this change. And, through this, they want to become kind of a point of pride in the community as participants in the energy transition. Like, we had a project that was actually exactly that story get featured in the Wall Street Journal about 2 weeks ago. And the farmers, cool. They were talking about how now, they're not only proud to show their daughters, but as well as that other farmers in the community are wondering if they could, raise capital for their projects like this as well. And that creates ripples in communities. And it's really exciting to also see, for example, that project was in Tennessee. And a lot of our investors, kind of not surprisingly, are in California and New York, kind of traditionally more progressive zones. And so they really also look at it as an opportunity to kind of reach across the table and, break bread with people who might not otherwise, find similar alignments, and to create kind of exciting new community bonds. So that's one where the story really does matter. And people,
so you would say, the kind of the components of the story there, it sounds like would be the people involved, and then the impact they're trying to make, and maybe the unique way in which they're choosing to do that.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll tell you one, there's a project that didn't raise money super quickly, and it was a used car store. And the guys themselves were great people, but, we did some customer interviews and people said, oh yeah, they're just used car salesmen. Like, that's not really where I feel like I want to put my money.
You're already climbing uphill with used car salesmen.
Exactly. And so that was one where, we had to kind of take a step back and go, okay, wow, maybe this wasn't the best compelling story. And in contrast, there was, Deborah Lockhart. She is a third generation BIPOC woman in Georgia, and like 60 people piled onto her project to fund it in a couple of days. And she's just an adorable woman who, put really great photos on her profile. And through that, ultimately also all the lending goes through the renewable energy developers. So they're the ones taking on the debt obligation, but they help set up the profile for Deborah. And that was a really feel-good story that, really did get the community to activate to support her project. So that's the impact investor lens, right? And then you had a question about kind of like other motives of the community as well, huh?
Right. Well, yeah, at least in terms of the impact investor, just to kind of clarify, it sounds like the story component is the impact you're making, the people involved, the unique way you're doing that, and you're touching someone's life, right? And you're showcasing that via photos and videos, and that's kind of how you're bringing that story to life, right?
Yeah. And through this also, I think one interesting angle here is that it's also reframing climate change from often a conversation around sacrifice to one of opportunity, right? So many people say you need to fly less, or you need to, change the appliances in your house, or you need to change your diet. And those are all really important levers in terms of where we need to go. But to instead frame it around kind of a market-driven solution that says, hey, look, you can invest in this and earn a competitive yield, definitely changes the narrative and speaks to a different demographic.
So to kind of zoom out here, I mean, you guys are a growing platform. You're having tons of success so far, and you're bringing some great stories to the world at the same time. What is your current view of the regulation crowdfunding landscape? What do you think is going to happen, this year and next? What are your thoughts on the current landscape?
Yeah, so I think it's going to continue to scale as crowdfunding kind of normalizes as a channel for people to participate in not only startups, but also in new asset classes. You look at they maybe not crowdfunding specifically, but some of the others like, say, Fundrise, Masterworks, VinoVest have really unlocked new asset classes for investors with a lot of success. And so we're really excited to be kind of doing the same through the regulation crowdfunding framework to make an exciting asset class more accessible to others. I think, one thing that we're really interested in is also how legislation around crowdfunding could potentially accelerate the development of renewable energy projects. And so I'll speak to two examples. So in France, there was a crowdfunding platform for renewable energy projects where if communities participated in that project, it got premium economics from the government. So they provided additional incentives. And in Spain, if a project has 10% of its equity crowdfunded through the community as a way of kind of driving community engagement, it gets to jump to the front of the interconnection queue and be the first ones connected to the grid, which is really important for those developers who say you're doing a $100 million project. You need to make sure your project gets connected, right? And so those are two really interesting levers of bringing the public along with it. And so as we think about scale in the US, we're asking ourselves, how can we potentially, drive policy that might be, more conducive to crowdfunding and energy specifically?
Very cool, man. Where can people go to learn more about Climatize? Where can go check out some of these campaigns, which you also have there available?
Sure. Yeah. So you can find us at www.climatize.earth. You can download the mobile app on any platform, so iOS or Android. And then we are just on the verge of launching our web app as well. And so you'll be able to access all the offerings from a desktop computer. We're aiming for a mid-July launch. So coming up really soon there as well.
Exciting, man. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I just have one more question for you, when it comes to this. So first of all, I mean, you have many different hats which you're wearing. Not only are you impacting people, you are also an entrepreneur. And for the people that are listening to this that are kind of falling into that category, we can either end with a quote that you like, a bit of advice that you would pass on that you've learned so far on your entrepreneurial journey, or just a word of encouragement for people out there with their own projects.
Sure. Yeah. So, I would say, as for one thing I feel like I've learned from this journey, it's that life gives you exactly what you need when you need it. No sooner, no later. And so if you just continue to chart the course, then, things will come together to help build an impactful mission. The second bit is that, especially in entrepreneurship, there are a lot of people that will say no along your journey. The very first pitch I ever gave for Climatize, the teacher said it was a terrible idea. The very first contest we pitched in, I lost. Now we've raised our first venture funding round. A week ago, we were in Fast Company's World-Changing Ideas list for not only company of the year, but also for the impact investing category. And so I think to any entrepreneur out there that's building and, grinding in the shadows, just understand that if you continue to keep that course and keep working away at what you're doing, then, oftentimes it's the non-obvious solutions that surprise the world. And so, I encourage you to just keep going and your time will come.
Well said. Will, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it. And I will link up everything in the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. My name is Salvador Briggman, and I'm here as the host of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast to bring to you every single week cutting-edge techniques, strategies, resources, and tools that go into a mega crowdfunding campaign launch. Whether you're doing an equity crowdfunding campaign or more of a traditional reward-style campaign on Kickstarter or Indiegogo, no matter the type of crowdfunding you are looking to do, I'm telling you, you can find a mentor or a success story by diving into the archives of this show. If you do nothing else, first of all, definitely take some action this week. I love action takers. I love executors. I love people who are freaking passionate about impacting the world for the positive and are relentless about the willingness to be able to step up and actually go out there and to accomplish their goals and be successful. It's almost an ethical duty, you would say, to be successful. But in addition, take a second to leave a positive rating and review of this podcast. If you're listening on iTunes on the way to work, or maybe you're listening on a long, trek with your family, or maybe you're even just listening to this as you're jogging or going on a bike ride or you're going to the gym, I'd appreciate it so much if you took even just 2 minutes here and left a positive rating and review on iTunes. For those of you who are like, Sal, I've been listening to your podcast for a while and I'm just trying to get into contact with you. Well, first of all, I totally sympathize. I do get a lot of emails nowadays at my website, crowdcrux.com. I have lots of people that are writing in looking for advice and help, and I've kind of had to prioritize my time. So one of the ways I make myself available to the community is through what I call individual intensive coaching call sessions. So this is really for people that are serious about getting their project, their startup, or their idea launched and using crowdfunding as the mechanism to not only get the funding they need, but also to get the validation, to build their tribe, to build their brand, and to build the entire foundation of a business, which allows them to do what they love, that they're passionate about, and turn their passion into profit. So if you want to learn more about my individual coaching call option, this is, again, an intensive one-off coaching call. If you're interested in working with me after that, we can talk about more long-term options. And I do, on a select basis, work with students who it's projects we believe in. I have to talk to my team about that. We have to be very passionate, have to see a lot of opportunity with that. But if you're interested in booking an individual one-on-one coaching call, go to the link in the description of this podcast at the link crowdcrux.com/coaching. That link is crowdcrux.com/coaching, crowdcrux.com/coaching. We'll take you there and you can book your individual one-on-one coaching call with me and get the call scheduled ASAP. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Sal, and I'll see you next time.